Sorry, bear with me. Okay, good afternoon and welcome to the RGJ Reno City Council Ward 1 Candidates Forum. I'm Brett McGinnis, Engagement Editor for the Reno Gazette-Journal, and tonight with me is, as moderator, is Editor Anjeanette Damon. We're being joined by incumbent council member Jenny Brekhus and challenger J.D. Drakulich. Both candidates will have 2 minutes to make an opening statement, and then we'll hand over the reins to Anjeanette for questions. Each candidate will have 1 minute to answer questions. Their opponent will have an opportunity for a 1 minute rebuttal. And we're going to wrap things up with a 1 minute closing statement from each. We did a Rochambeau right before we started. Jenny Brekhus, you are the winner or the loser. You're going to be going first here. So let's lead off with you.
Sure, I'm serving first, he's receiving. So my name's Jenny Brekhus. I am the Reno City Council member for Ward 1. I'm a two-time incumbent and I'm running for my third term. I've lived in Reno since 1998 when my husband and I basically picked Reno off the map because we wanted to be in a place where the mountains met the desert. He's from El Paso. We met in Albuquerque, and I'm a Bay Area native who knew about Reno from spending time up in Tahoe when I was a young person. We've raised our daughter here. She's a Worcester High School graduate all through the public schools. And in 2011, I decided to step up for the council in the depths of the recession because I was concerned about the direction the city was going at that point in time. A lot of money had been spent. The city was saddled in debt. And I thought that some of that spending did not reflect the priorities of our citizens. In particular, the Moana pool that had served this community for 3 generations was allowed to fall apart. Coming on the council during the depths of the recession, the city had laid off about 1/3 of its workforce, so fiscal priorities were front and center. But as we started to grow and see that we were going to be on that upswing again, creating models to grow and bring the economic opportunity that comes with growth, but also manage that growth so that we maintain the urban amenities that we all love in this biggest little city, and keep that feeling has been front and center in this last term. Now we're in COVID. New times calls for new leadership. I'm a city planner by training. I've worked for 3 cities. I'm always looking far on to the horizon and balancing the complex issues that we are facing. And now the complexity is never greater. But I am optimistic that Reno can do very well coming through this and coming out of this, and I hope to discuss that tonight. Thank you.
Thank you. J.D. Drakulich, you're up, 2 minutes.
Thank you, Brett. Hi, everybody. J.D. Drakulich, running for Reno City Council Ward 1. Little background about myself. Born and raised here. I've actually been in Ward 1 for 33 years. My family's been in this ward actually dating back to 1940s. I am 4th generation. Made it through the school system here, went to a bunch of elementary schools going through the ward, and graduated from Reno High in 2000. I went to UNR, achieved about 88 credits. I was kind of one of those people that just didn't know what they were going to do with their college diploma, and the recession hit around 2007, 2008. I was sitting there wondering what I was going to do with that piece of paper, and probably like a lot of people watching was getting riddled with college debt. So I made the decision to step out of college and start my residential real estate career and become a small business owner. I really wanted the challenge. I feel like I'm creative and have a good sense of how to, get things done, and I'm solution oriented. I'm also a husband and a father to a 7-year-old little boy. He is gonna grow up here, obviously, and the decisions we make today are gonna affect if he stays here and raises his family here. So selfishly, the goal is that he loves this place as much as I do, and it's affordable, and he wants to raise his family here so I see my little grandkids. That's the hope. 2016, really the reason for my run is I was invited onto the board of the Eddy House. Really took issue with that organization and really committed with them. I really turned it into about a part-time job. They needed a lot of help, and I wanted to be there and learn about that population. Was their secretary, then voted in as VP, and now I'm in my 2nd term as their board president. And I would say that's the reason for my run, is to make a huge impact on the homeless population here.
Okay, great.
J.D.
Well, thank you. Thank you.
Sorry,
both.
Anjeanette, the show is yours.
I will take the reins. We have a number of questions tonight. Some of them I have come up with out of my own little head, and others I asked for some suggestions from your many constituents. So we will jump right into some of the biggest issues that are facing people. And the first question, let's see, Mr. Drakulich will give you the first shot at answering this, and then we'll go back and forth about who gets the first shot at answering the question. And the question is, many Reno residents don't feel as if their concerns are always being heard when the council approves large housing developments such as Daybreak or Stonegate, and that council members are listening more to developers than the experts on the environment, traffic, infrastructure. What will your approach be to considering these massive housing developments, particularly these ones on the outskirts of the city?
Sure. Project like Daybreak complicated a lot to it. I've been following it as much as possible. I know the concerns, and really it came down to the water storage or the water mitigation. I do believe it fit the need of the community on some level, and I'm glad they negotiated, hopefully, to a better solution by bringing down 700 units. So I feel like maybe the community was heard after it was declined, and obviously the lawsuit. But as a general perspective or strategy of mine, I believe in two things. There's good projects and there's bad projects. And I think what we're missing out is when there's a bad project that doesn't fit a need in the community, maybe it's a luxury subdivision and is not hitting our affordable market, or the community around there just doesn't support it. Those projects need to be rejected swiftly. Let's make no qualms about it. Dragging those out, waste city resource, really, only anger the builder developer who get dragged through. I'd rather push them off and say, come back to the drawing board with something we need. But on the other side of that, good projects are needed right now. We are starting to push our lower and middle income individuals out unless we start building supply for them. So good projects need to be pushed through quickly. Thanks.
Thank you. And Ms. Brekhus, same question to you.
Yes, so this is my area of professional experience, and master plan communities, because that's what you're talking about, are an important component of Reno's housing stock. Collin Ranch was one that was conceptualized in the 70s, and it completed build out in the last couple of years. The last two subdivisions were done. So there is a place for those in our community, but you need two strong considerations. That is, does your policy support that land at that point in time? And also, do you have the infrastructure and the services and ability to serve that? When I came on the council in 2013, the first workshop, I said, let's do a master plan. We have a master plan from the 90s. It's been riddled. It's gone through development cycles. We need a new one. That was adopted. And it's the template for where we want to grow. And as part of that, we need to monitor the land supply so we know we're not leapfrogging ahead when to bring on new development, when something like Collin Ranch is done and it's time to move on to the next areas. But also the infrastructure and the geographic services of public safety are the considerations.
Thank you very much. Okay, next question. In 2017, there was considerable work done on an accessory dwelling units policy for the city. Some people call them granny flats. That was ultimately rejected by the council after a lot of Ward 1 constituents came to council and complained about the policy. Other people say that this would be a good way to increase affordable housing stock and promote infill. Ms. Brekhus, you go first. What is your position on accessory dwelling units?
Well, first of all, the master plan said that the most affordable housing is going to be that it's already on existing development, and that would imply also accessory dwelling units. I brought that forward to the council, and at the end of the day, the council did not want to go there. There was quite a bit of opposition. And you're accurate, from older Ward 1 neighborhoods. It was going to be related to a 9,000 minimum square foot lot, but for many on the council, that was just not enough to put two units on. So I still think they're a strategic approach to housing in certain scenarios, but it's not something that I'm going to be bringing forward as an initiative because the council has already looked at it, and I'm ready to move on to other types of housing models. I am living here on an alley in the MF14 zoning district that has 7,000 square foot lots looking at a granny flat. So I know they have a place, 2 units on one lot, but it's not an initiative that I'll be bringing forward into Ward 1 neighborhoods in my term.
And Mr. Drakulich, same question.
similar sentiments there. I don't think it's an appropriate change for someone like somewhere like Old Southwest neighborhood, one where a lot of Old South residents called be concerned about the potential commercialization over time. And this is a historic neighborhood. We do need to preserve it. Is there application in other areas? Absolutely. I would hope if this was something that came to the table, we'd be looking at certain areas and zones where it does fit and make sense. Also, it's one of those things where with ADUs, that owner would have to build it. So it's not like it solves the problem immediately. And how much of an impact would it have? Do we need to change zoning because of it? So complicated issue, but that's where I stand at it right now.
Okay, thank you very much. Turning now to a housing issue still, but the area's unsheltered community. And JD, I believe you get this question first. What do you believe the city's role should be in, one, addressing some of the underlying conditions, mental health issues, substance abuse issues for this area's unsheltered community?
To kick it off, mental health facilities and mental health professionals, I hope we can get more coming to this community. It's crucial to solving the problem for our most vulnerable. Also, substance abuse and detox centers. So that's a piece. But really what we got to be focusing on is prevention and housing. And we have 200 local nonprofits in the region that all serve this continuum and can all play a part. So we have the infrastructure. We just have to learn how to collaborate, bring people together. I just took a tour with their Eddie House with an organization called Stepping Stone. Never heard of them, small place, but they place unsheltered individuals. They assist them getting into houses with extra bedrooms, and there's something affordable for them if they're on the SSI. So we have all the pieces around us. Let's continue to focus, and I'm sure we'll touch on this topic more, and I'll get to it then.
Thank you. And Ms. Brekhus, same question.
Well, you asked a very specific question about what the city should do about mental health and substance abuse, persons suffering from that who are homeless. And one component of the homeless situation is the encampments. And to the degree that people are dying and deteriorating out in our public spaces of harm to themselves and others if they start fires and so on, that is absolutely a city public safety response. And so we do need to go in and make sure those people are safe and not harming themselves. And that is very important. When you take it up to these root causes about addressing mental health, substance abuse, that very quickly gets into healthcare, which is federal policy. And we do every year tell our federal legislators how we want them to look at federal issues and federal policy. But also I want to pivot to the nonprofits. They do play a role. And the city, prior to building the shelter on 4th Street, because the county would not do that, used to fund a lot of those nonprofits. We don't have the resources to do from our federal funds, but we could get there if the county exercised more role.
Thank you. And you started to touch on my next question, and this is about the tent cities that are springing up along the Truckee, well, I shouldn't say springing up, they've been in place for quite a while now along the Truckee River and in other areas of the city. What is your approach to these? Should, especially since the city is lacking on shelter space, do you just come in and clean them all out and move the people along, move them down the river? What's your approach to the tent cities?
Well, I also want to touch, though, on the role, because this is a very complex issue with a lot of government agencies playing a role, like federal and healthcare. But in California, a very novel approach was passed at their state legislature, was the ability for people, even nonprofits, to take some of those people into a conservatorship. It's not taking them up to Par Boulevard, which isn't part of the response to your question, and it isn't institutionalizing them like, we remember my mother did her nursing rotation at the Napa mental health, health asylum. It's very safe roles for government to take these people into compassionate conservatorships. And I wish the state of Nevada would act on that. With encampments, which is your issue, this is the area the city's budget has grown in the most to respond to that. And first and foremost, if an encampment is proving to be a fire threat or a public safety health threat to our river or to someone themselves, I do ask for those to be removed. And I'll let him, I'm out of time, and I'll let him catch up and maybe do a rebuttal to that. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Drakulich.
No, I'm going to use this moment to do something I've been echoing. I think it's really important. There's two things we have to focus on: accountability and stability. And with the stability piece, we have to focus on a housing first strategy. So the people in our encampments along our rivers, public areas, we need to be case working, doing outreach, which can be ran by our nonprofits, and finding housing solutions. Maybe they fit at the shelter temporarily. Maybe they need to be at Village at Sage Street. Maybe they can clean themselves up and hold themselves accountable and go to Crossroads. We have to be approaching each person with not just one template, but a big plan and coming forward with our nonprofits. Then on top of that, I've been very clear with my neighbors, and they're clear with me. They want accountability. They're not happy that they get to sleep at Idlewild and set up big tents and potentially throw pollution into the river, and or their friends and family have to walk over needles and human waste. So they feel like they're being disrespected, that we're not holding them accountable for living in public areas and really taking advantage of our greatest resource, which is the Truckee River.
Okay, thank you very much. We're going to switch topics here a little bit. And recently there have been a number of examples of incidents that have people concerned about racism in Reno. For example, incidences of people hijacking public comment to scream racial epithets. We've had in recent elections 2 candidates, Black candidates, have their likenesses darkened on campaign mailers and signs. I'm wondering if you think that Reno has a problem with racism, and if so, how would you address it?
I think every community has a problem with racism. We're not alone on that. The whole country's going through it. I understand the civil unrest. I believe that racism is immoral. And I believe that, teaching morals comes from within the family. That's an important factor. I think the city's role should be resource guided and bringing information. But in reality, changing racism is a big task, and that belongs within the family. If there's any systemic racism that we find within the city of Reno, obviously we want to sniff that out. I'm unaware of anything or any policies that are racist. But once again, we have to have civil discourse and continue the discussion.
Okay, Ms. Brekhus.
Yeah, there have been growing concern about racism in Reno prior to this spring, and people have brought those to me, and I have brought those to our police chief. And some of them have been as postering around flyers and so on. And it is something that is going on around the country. And at what point does freedom of expression reach into very dangerous speak that could be acted upon? And that is not an unserious topic, and one that people in the community have brought to me and I've expressed over to our police officers or our chief. I think that we have done a good job in Reno in expressing that we value inclusivity, that we are transparent and participatory at City Hall. And I think that messaging is incumbent on all of us who sit in public office locally. We had in one of those comments, and it was this spring, someone made some ethnic slurs attacking my family, and that was very hurtful. And so I think we need to speak out and we need to push back. Thank you.
I just want to follow up on that question a little bit, Mr. Drakulich. You repeated a couple times that you believe that this is a family issue. Is that to say that you don't believe that elected leaders and government institutions have a role in addressing racism at the root causes?
Sure, yeah, where the root causes are, if there's anything inside the city of Reno, yes, they should apply themselves to snuff that out. But if we're talking about racism as a whole, what I've been doing over the past 6 months since George Floyd is communicating with my son. I'm married to a Filipino woman. He's multiracial, and we are talking about racism within our house and how to handle that. That's the important piece I want to come across with. But I think it's easy to say, if we find any policies that are racist, let's snuff them out. It's that simple, and I want to hear where those are, and I have plenty to learn. So it's not that I'm ignoring that. I just obviously need to learn more.
Ms. Brekhus, did you have any final word on that issue?
No, I don't. I think that the council and all levels of society and public office have a duty to speak out when those sort of activities and statements are being made about other people, and explain and express that our community, our culture, our democracy is based upon participatory and equality in the law, in the eyes of the law, and we have to put that as a core value in how we walk and talk ourselves. So.
Thank Thank you very much. I am forgetting who gets to go first on this. I believe it's you, Ms. Brekhus. Newlands Park and various Newlands neighborhoods are in Ward 1. Senator Francis Newlands, who's the namesake of these parks, was a demonstrated white supremacist in his day. And there have been calls by some in the community, some in the neighborhood, to remove his name from the park and remove the memorial to him. Not everybody agrees with that approach, but I'd like to know what your stance is on whether or not that memorial should be removed and his name removed from various places within the ward.
Yeah, that came up in June or so from some people, and I did meet with them. And I pride myself on understanding Western history pretty well in terms of the development of the West. And, he's identified with the projects, but I didn't know this background. When I sat with them, I went, wow, the Wikipedia, he really was someone who was from Mississippi and carried some of those Reconstruction values into Nevada and then out east. But the question of how to make these amends or changes to your public places is going on around the country. It's going on around in my own hometown down in the Bay Area about Sir Francis Drake. And I think you need to be deliberative about it. The city staff did start to have some conversations on a global policy on that. I think that we need to get front and center this issue to the council and hear all sides. And where it is right now is the attorneys have looked at the issue. It was a privileged document. I haven't even opened it up because I've been so busy. If there's going to be a discussion on it, I'm not even sure there's people on the council who know particularly where Newlands is. So it's a very localized issue. And I'll continue and, come back on a rebuttal on that. Thanks.
Thank you. Mr. Drakulich.
Sure, and there's some truth to that. There's legal ramifications to making changes there, and there's a lot to know about that and what that looks like. But when I heard about this, I did what I would do with most things. I wanted to collaborate, mediate, learn, listen. I met with Ben and Kalila and Doug and heard what they had to say, and honestly was affected by them and felt their heart. And then I got plenty of calls from people in Old Southwest, whether it was my aunt or someone else, and their concerns about what would happen if we made changes. And I think what I discovered is there is compromise to be had. And whether it was supplanting the memorial or just adding something to it, I chose that, or what I told people is that I wanted them to have a civil discourse, and if they wanted to bring something to the council, this would be a community decision. I would want it to be based out of really Ward 1 or even Newlands specific and the kind of the outlying areas, because this affects them the most. Jenny's right. Not a lot of people even know what this is, but the people who drive by it every day are the people who deserve to make the decision together.
Okay, thank you. Mr. Drakulich, you go first on this one.
Oh, can I just add a little bit more on that? Is the first key to that is to get this attorney's analysis on the legal ramifications, a public document. And then second is to have a community dialogue and look at it. It may be that that land is so tied to the Newlands Lane, there's nothing that could happen in like maybe some auxiliary effort of, having some memorial of inclusivity could be placed somewhere there, but it's not necessarily just a Newlands issue because it's part of our park system. And we always need to remember that our Reno park system is a 110-year legacy that we've all inherited and we all have ownership in it also.
Okay, thank you very much. Did you have anything else to add?
No, you're good.
Okay. All right, Mr. Drakulich, moving on to calls from the community since this spring for police reform. Some people have asked for more transparency in police use of force, some changes to use of force policies, and perhaps even reallocating resources either away from police or in addition to police for more mental health and social services kind of responders. What is your approach to those calls for police reform?
Sure. So I don't support defunding the police. They have the hardest job in the community. Going to what you said, reallocating where they go on their calls and the services they provide. I love that conversation. It may even be a solve for how many budget issues they have, because in reality, we're short on police officers, and it's been a decade. We have less patrol cars. My ward feels less safe as the community grows. So their needs need to be met, but also how are we going to serve our citizens and keep them safe while holding the law and order. So I think obviously we just have to look at how we can tighten things up a little bit and serve both sides.
All right. Ms. Brekhus.
Yeah. So as I said earlier, during the Great Recession, the city laid off a third of its workforce. It still has not recovered law enforcement numbers to the pre-Great Recession. And we're a growing city with more geography and people to cover. I do not support defunding the police. I think they have been given jobs because they're the largest part of the budget. And also, so they've kind of had mission creepage. Some of that is related to the encampments, and they're not the best people to do it. We should be having team street workers, social workers online, but city doesn't have social workers. That needs to come from the county. I've chosen to focus in 3 areas long before the calls for police reform this year with the council. And those are, one of the positions I reformed was an audit. And I've called every year for the police department to be audited to see how they do and for the resources. And every department needs that. It's a best practice. The second is I am the liaison to the Civil Service Commission, where the hiring and the promotion rules are organized. They're independent, but that's the way we get the workforce to represent the public they serve. And then the third is also on workman's comp, which I will get into, getting suffering cops not off the job if they need to go off the job. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Brekhus. Okay, now I have a round of individual questions. They're kind of tailored for one question for each candidate, but I will give the other person an opportunity to address it if they would like to as well. Ms. Brekhus, I'll ask your question first. You have been criticized for being combative with City of Reno staff to the point that the previous city manager issued a reprimand to you and limited your direct contact with individual staff members. Can you explain that behavior and what, if anything, you've done to try and improve your relationships within city government?
Yeah, that city manager had about had a 36-month tenure, which is a little short. She left on her own. She was not up to the job. My calls for accountability were always to her, and I think she pushed back on that way. And I'll just use that as an example. Is she wasn't prepared to do the job. She lobbied to get the job to the degree that the last person left and said, I'm not going to take the job. You got one person running. She used that to deflect issues that she was not getting and accomplishing. And at the end of the day, she realized she needed to leave. And a sign that she was not a city manager is that she's now the government affairs person for a university down in Las Vegas. And so I think that was a very unfair manipulation by her. And I have good relationships. I have former employees, because I've been associated with the office since 1998, who are supporters of mine, retirees. And I also have good relationships with other folks I've worked with from the other organizations, whether it's regional planning or TUMWA. So I have very deep roots with a lot of those people as former colleagues, and one person who did not succeed in this community is the one who's responsible for that, and it was a political move by her.
Okay, I appreciate you addressing your opinion about her performance, but I would like to point out that we have seen in some public council meetings some sharp tones that you've used with staff. And in my conversations with individual staff members, they echo those concerns. So I'm wondering, is this all the former city manager's fault, or do you have any ownership of those problems yourself?
You know, you learn a lot on this job. No one is made a city manager first thing, or a city council member. You grow into this job. But another thing is I've also had to stand my ground on a lot of issues with my colleagues. I've gone off in different directions. Just last week, I went down 6-1 on a substantial waste management vote that gives waste management a lot more return to their revenues from the book of business they do for our cities. I went down 6-1 against the Apple deal that gave Apple almost $900,000 last quarter in city taxpayer numbers. I am the type, as a former regulator, who can move on and take things not personally, but I think other people do on the council. And sometimes sharp tones are used against me. I think you've seen those too. And sometimes I've been more in a defensive position. But I've, like I said, I've always learned, because I've been on the other side of the dais as staff, and I know that I have to be ready for the tough questions to come my way. Okay. But I will say, it's doing the public's work is very important business, and serious questions need to be asked, and I've asked them.
Thank you. Mr. Drakulich.
I could be,
Okay, thank you, Ms. Brekhus. But you've used your time. Mr. Drakulich, do you have any words to address that question?
Well, I've actually, I guess, echoing some of what you said, Anjeanette. My understanding of her being barred for that time had less to do with Sabra and what she cited as harassment of city staff. And understanding, I think maybe even wrote about it, Anjeanette, is that they didn't want to be in the room with her because of the harassment. They felt intimidated. From my understanding, I've spoken to staff members too, without saying names, they say the same thing. They feel mistreated. And if they speak up and try to tell someone about it, it's not uncommon for them to feel the wrath later on. And I've seen it in council meetings too. Vice Mayor Reese called her unprofessional because of her position and posturing on the council. So this is actually a second piece of my run is I don't feel like she's got enough collaboration or leadership to actually put something together in a policy. She actually has some pretty good ideas. She's an intelligent woman, but can you get 3 more votes and get something done? And I don't think she can. And I'm okay with the nay votes and being 6-1, but it's at one point in time, when are you going to actually be effective and push something forward to solve problems in our community?
Okay, and Ms. Brekhus, I'll give you 30 seconds to respond to what Mr. Drakulich said, if you'd like.
Yeah, I'm not a selfie queen. Sometimes on bodies, you need to bring the ideas forward and let other people take ownership of them. And that's what has happened on a lot of issues at the city of Reno, including the master plan, including the downtown plan that led to the ambassadors that are doing the work out there with the community with the homelessness, the transparency lobbyist registration, the campaign finance reform, the graffiti plan, and the traffic safety plan. All of those were ideas that I brought to the council, and then I sit back and let everyone take ownership when they get done. Thank you.
Thank you. Okay, Mr. Drakulich, this one is for you. You recently sent out a mailer accusing Councilwoman Brekhus of taking large special interest campaign contributions. You found that over the 9 years that she's been running for office, she raised more than $300,000. However, in just the last 3 months, you have raised more than half of that, including almost $100,000 just from developers and contractors and builders alone. That includes, excuse me, I'm losing my voice, $10,000 from the Daybreak development, $5,000 from Prado Ranch, who wants to build in the flooded Swan Lake Basin, $15,000 from the developers involved in the Park Lane project. And I think when voters see these big dollar contributions, they tend to wonder whether those donors are going to have better access to you. And so that's the question. Will those donors have more access to you? What do you do with such big contributions?
Sure. Let me address your first part too in my mailer I sent out. So first off, I'm very proud of the hard work my team and I put in during this campaign. She's a tough opponent. She's the incumbent. Really, I was the third man in the show for the primary, and my hard work paid off, and I think people saw that. I have a diverse group of donors, and their donations are a reflection of their belief in me. They understand my conviction on making a huge impact on the homeless population, which affects them. And they also see me as a leader who can collaborate and solve our community's problems. And they too are frustrated with Councilwoman Brekhus and her ineffective leadership. So running a campaign is hard and expensive, and the reality is my opponent accepts donations from the same sources as I do. 68% of them over her career are from special interest groups, and she still calls and asks them for money, and I'm okay with that. I just want people to know that just because I received those donations doesn't mean I'll make any different decisions. I've made no pledges or promises to anybody. I already said it once before, and I've been echoing this to the builder developer community. It's a bad project. I'm not pushing it through. It's a good project. I'm going to help streamline things and bring this to market so the costs are lowered and we are solving the need of our housing crisis.
Do you have an opinion yet about the Prado Ranch development in the flooded Swan Lake Basin?
No, I have a lot to read up on that, and obviously some decisions will come down my way if I'm on the council, so not at this moment.
Okay. Ms. Brekhus, do you have any words on that question?
Yeah, I mean, that mailer was an attempt of deception to the voters. It showed a career of fundraising, and it was not related to this race. And, you know, when you deceive the voters on the campaign trail, what faith can they have in you that you'll be honest with you when you're doing the job? And that is just paramount, that you are honest and transparent with the voters. And I thought that was very sad, but reflective possibly of how he would do the job. The second point is, when I look at his fundraising this last quarter, great for him. You know, I've been out there also. I want everyone's support. But at this point, I have about 432 contributions to this campaign cycle, and my average contribution is under $300. If he wants to show what his numbers are, fine. But he raised a lot of money, and a lot of it is people that I've gone around with, and I will go around with again. Jacobs, who's tore down a lot of apartments in Ward 1 and took a church, got an option on a parking lot that a 100-year-old church has used for years. That's an example. Prado, I don't know about that project because I haven't been able to walk through that mud and look at it, but they're coming. And Daybreak, we all know what happened with that money.
Thank you very much. Mr. Drakulich, 30 seconds if you'd like to respond.
Completely disagree with the first part. The fallacy was her mailer that she's a people-powered campaign, and she's not. She hasn't been. And just because they're not donating to her now doesn't mean that she hasn't asked. She's still asking these developers for money, and she can't wait to cash their check. They're just tired of her. That's why I brought that out. Everybody I met said, Jenny still calls me every day. And the one thing I discovered is it wasn't long ago, she received $10,000 from the White family out in Verdi, and what, a couple weeks or a month later voted no against Meridian South 120. So was that $10,000 buying that vote? That's what it comes off as.
Ms. Brekhus, not to beat this as a dead horse, but I think you deserve a chance to respond to that.
Yeah, this absolutely is a people's powered campaign. My fundraising is like anyone else's in local government right now with the numbers and the volumes. I'll throw it up against anyone.
Okay. All right, next question, Ms. Brekhus, first to you, and this was a suggested reader question. Who are you voting for president?
I'll be voting for the Biden ticket.
And Mr. Drakulich.
I'm not going to answer that question, and I've already written about it. I am not going to buy goodwill on either side. I'm a registered nonpartisan. I could say Biden, and I'm going to get nasty words, and I'm going to say Trump. I'm going to get some more nasty words. It's not an appropriate question to ask anybody at any time. And I think people would be shocked what my actual answer is. So I'm just going to leave it vague, and that's where it is.
You know, I think that the federal government and whoever is president does have a lot of say about the kind of money and the programs that local governments can avail themselves of. So I do believe it's a fair question, and I'll push you just one more time. Have you made a decision, and who will you be voting for president?
I made a decision, and I'm not going to tell you. I believe both bring something to the table, and I don't think there's any perfect answer there. There's obviously negatives on both sides as well. So.
All right, sounds good. All right, moving on.
Could I reply to that?
Well, he didn't say anything about you, Ms. Brekhus, so we're gonna move on in the interest of time. All right, so the issue of public safety. I mean, we talked about police reform, but there's also some as council members would describe it, structural funding deficiencies for public safety, which would include the fire department and the police department, as well as dispatch and other important functions for the city. What's your approach to funding these services? Would you support a tax increase, for example, that has been discussed? And I believe, Mr. Drakulich, it's your turn to go first on this.
Sure. In regards to our budget and the finances, I have a lot to learn. I'm a small business owner. I understand budgets and P&Ls and things, but learning more about how to fund them, I'm looking forward to that moment, but we do need to find ways to do it. And if we're talking about budget shortfall upcoming because of the pandemic, I'm a fan of getting our economy back where it needs to be, doing things safely. My hope and my call to all the business owners, when I'm on the council, please call me, tell me what you need to get to pre-pandemic levels of activity, but safely. Keep the masks on, listen to science, social distance, but there's ways to get through. Our town tweeted it today about Liberty Food and Wine Exchange. The city shut down First Street so they could have more capacity and probably hire back a couple of waiters and waitresses. So I think that's where we need to be focused. If we're going to be proactive on funding these places, let's get our economy going again.
And Ms. Brekhus.
Yeah, I mean, I've developed a lot of expertise in public finance in our budget. I studied that extensively in graduate school and have really grown into that and consider myself the budget specialist on the council and on all the special agencies. And there is a structural deficiency. A lot of people in our community look to our growth and our growing and say, well, isn't that helping your revenues at the city? It does to a point in pre-COVID times. We don't know what COVID's going to do, but it also comes with service demands. So the approaches that I've been advocating for a long time are, we have too many lock boxes on too many sources of revenue in this region that need to go on the table to consider providing essential services. I'll use the example, the lodger's tax for the properties, our tourism properties. They go to the RSCBA to essentially pay bowlers or the bowling association for how many people come. I don't want to subsidize other people on their vacation. I want to have amenities for our people to enjoy here. There's other types of lock boxes, and I'll let that go and answer your tax question on the other response.
Okay, thank you. I am interested, actually, Mr. Drakulich, what you think about it. And Ms. Brekhus has spoken about this many times about these different regional or lockboxed funds. One of those is the Building Enterprise Fund, when builders or because any kind of construction pays a permit fee that goes into a special fund that just funds that department rather than general city services. What's your thought on that Building Enterprise Fund? Is that the best use of that money, or should that be put to a broader use in the city?
Honestly, I don't have enough information to have a strong opinion about it. But if we're talking about development and how to leverage this growth that we're experiencing and take advantage of not only the ability to see what our builders and developers can do to bring back money to us, I think we need to consider bringing down permit and impact fees and looking at reoccurring fees in the perpetuity of the building so that we have a long-term way of funding our budget instead of just upfront fees. So ultimately, I'm open to any discussion about this, and I have more to learn, I'm sure.
Okay, in 30 seconds, Ms. Brekhus, did you want to address the tax increase question?
That is an easy lockbox, and let me explain it to people. Is if you have a home-based business, you pay your business license, you do your work out of your house, you're an accountant, that goes into the general fund and pays for the police officer to come around. When you put in a water heater in your house, or someone builds a single-family home, it goes into a fund. It's locked just to pay building inspectors to come out. Well, in times of high growth, that runs such a surplus that the city can't even figure out how to spend that money. It's locked away. That needs to get unlocked and come in to pay general services. And there's a lot of interest. Many of those are the ones on his finance report who won't let that happen year in and year out.
Thank you. Okay, we are bumping up against time. This was going to be two different questions, but I think I'll just kind of combine it and maybe give you a minute and a half each to address it. And I believe, Ms. Brekhus, you're first with this one. And that's on the issue of the pandemic and COVID-19. And I'm wondering what you believe the city's role is in helping people stay safe from this virus. And also what ideas you have to help the city rebound economically from the pandemic.
Yeah.
Minute and a half.
Okay, I think we're in the third wave of our response as a city. The first was the lockdown, the understanding it was coming, responding to the emergency operations, the governor. The second, during the summer, was really getting those federal funds in, which Congress assembled a lot of money very quickly, not well-designed programs. We had some role in just pushing them out, pushing them out, pushing them out. $3 million to the school district just last week. I think this third wave right now is when we need to be very strategic, understand how we're in it for the long haul. Look, I'm looking twice a day to see if the federal government is going to move more money forward. I think they are. And I don't think it has anything to do with the presidential election. I think it's other factors. But when that comes, we need to be prepared to design very good programs. I think that hopefully a universal basic income will be a part of that. So if businesses go into close down or the economy is not as open as it could, we can pay people to stay home. We're the wealthiest country in the history of the world. We can get through this. And also we can get through it very well in Reno. We have suffered with this and with the smoke this summer. I'm optimistic that that commonality that we've all shared can put us together in a way that we've never been together to tackle this, and then to tackle the climate change that we are experiencing right now, right this summer. Thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Drakulich.
I don't think it's a we can. I think it's a we are handling this well right now. I think Washoe County has proven that it can be safe. Our hospitals are not overrun. Obviously, we're still dealing with infection rates and death, but I think COVID is one of those things we're going to have to live with it. And even if a vaccine's out, that is not the cure all of everything. So let's start learning to live out of fear of it and with reasonable caution. Kind of like I talked about before, wear your mask. If the science is proving masks are good and social distancing, let's follow that. Let's listen to scientists, but we have to learn with it and not have such a pessimistic approach to the future, but how we're going to proactively work alongside it until whatever, we reach herd immunity or the vaccine's incredible. But right now, we can't sit back and live in fear and let COVID dominate our lives because it has irreparable damage. I mean, we know that it's hurting people's mental health, a lot of suicide and depression. So the more fear we live in, the worse it gets for us. So let's be proactive.
Okay, thank you very much. And we've come now to the time for our closing statements. And Ms. Brekhus, you get to go first, and then we'll hear from Mr. Drakulich.
Well, I'll just speak to Ward 1 residents who may be watching and are undecided on this race at this point. I stepped forward during difficult economic conditions. Now we're in even more difficult economic conditions possibly, and knitting it all together, the complexity of the issues that we must deal with, the difficulty of the decisions that we make, maybe 1,500 a year at the council dais in public, all have ramifications and interconnectedness. And I've dealt with everyone in collaboration with my colleagues, but also in listening to what the people who send me into this office think needs to be done. I'm not beholden to anyone on the council. I'm not beholden to the special interests who have a lot of writing on what decisions are made. And I'm also going to lead this third term with a lot of vision and optimism for the future. We are doing well as a city. We can manage this growth so it benefits all, and we can meet our challenges. And I hope the residents will appreciate the job I've done and send me back there again. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Mr. Drakulich.
Okay, thank you again for everything. So I believe we need fresh ideas and a fresh perspective on the homeless issue. It's that simple. There's been no sense of urgency over the past several years, and I'm going to work tirelessly to make an impact on that population. We also need collaboration with our community stakeholders and other elected officials so that we can operate in a shared ownership of our problem, which includes the housing crisis and how to recover economically from the pandemic. Being combative and creating conflict with fellow council members is not the right way to serve my ward or the community. I know it's important for my neighbors to have an independent voice on the council, and I am that candidate, but I also have the ability to work well alongside my colleagues. I do want to say thank you guys who all were watching, and when you do cast your ballot, I would appreciate your vote. Thank you guys.
All right, thank you very much.
Great, thanks everyone. Thanks for viewers for joining us. I guess that wraps it up. Thank you.